Okay, guys, so here we're finishing up the introduction of the Tanya. Where today's the 19th, the 20th day of Kislev. It's the day that the Tanya was published in 1796. So today we're going to finish, hopefully, the introduction to the Tanya, and then we'll go straight into it. We have so much to cover. We got 53 chapters. I got to write this book before my daughter's bar mitzvah in a year. Okay. So in the Tanya, we've spoken a lot about the Alter Rebbe himself, the author. We've spoken about him as a movement. And now we're going to focus today more on the actual Tanya in the book. His approach to dealing with the solution, to all the solutions, to all the problems, as we mentioned yesterday. A very tall order is what he states in his introduction. We'll read it soon, eventually. He says that in this book, we can answer all the questions to all the answers. Why? Because he goes to the core and the root of the human psychological structure. So that when you can understand what goes on inside of you, what the struggle is, that will give you the vision, the clarity, the tools to be able to process any conceivable problem that goes on inside of you. Think of a person who's struggling in a dark room. He's trying to get out. What does he do? He has to grope his way around the room to find the door handle, to find the light switch. He's going to struggle with the window and the vase between the bookcase and the doorknob until he gets his way out. But then imagine somebody comes in and he just flicks the light switch. Now what happens? You're like, oh, I go straight to the door. It's like, no problem. That's what the Alter Rebbe is doing to us. He's flicking the light switch on me, on you. And now, if you have the tenacity to be able to experience this epic odyssey into the scariest place on earth, which is not out there in the Amazon or out on some planet, but in the nanoverse, inside of yourself, if you have the courage to stare yourself in the eye to the point that you can discover all of the complexities, the intricacies, and the dirty laundry that lies within you. If you can turn that light on, if you can allow the Alter Rebbe to turn that on for you, now you know where you're going. In his approach to this inner battle, he really blazes a whole new trail. The war inside of the soul of a person is not a war between good and bad, the way it's commonly being perceived until this time. He almost doesn't even use these terms of good and bad. Rather, he speaks about a far more fundamental battle that's taking place inside of the person. The battle that takes place between our two identities, our animal soul and our godly soul. So it's not that there's good and bad fighting inside of you, like you've been invaded by some sort of external force that's trying to vanquish your true self. He says there's actually two of you. There's two of you. You've got a godly soul and you've got an animal soul, and you're oscillating between the two of them. You identify deeply with both of them. And the journey towards self-mastery, incorporates the ability to bring peace between these two souls, not to vanquish one over the other, because it's a part of you. It's not good conquering evil. It's the godly soul learning to handle the animal soul. What does that mean? Imagine like you got, you're a high-powered lawyer, and there's a hooligan that hangs around panhandling at the front door of your office. What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
To go somewhere else.
You can ask him to leave, but he's not going to leave. He's a hooligan. So how about if you figure out a way that you can hire him to work for you? Maybe he could become your bodyguard, right?
That's how I hired Berger.
Imagine you could hire him to become your bodyguard. Imagine he become your bouncer. What happens if he became your driver? You dress him nicely, and now you use his inability to focus You use his non-conforming lifestyle to actually service you. You see where I'm going with this, right? Another example I would like to give is of a horse and a rider. So the rider, is a human being. The horse is an animal. They're not communicating, right? This guy wants to frolic in the meadows, and this guy wants to live a good life, right? So what do? Imagine if you can get a saddle, and you can train the horse, and you can convince the horse that you stick with me, I'm going to take good care of you. Now the horse is going to take the rider to places he can never have reached until now. Now he's going to help him win wars and reach positions of authority and respect that he can never have reached on his own. This is what the Alter Rebbe is trying to teach us. We're not trying to vanquish the evil inside of us. We're just trying to channel it. Now, we've got a lot of stuff inside of us. Can you imagine if you'd be able to channel that into a healthy direction, right? So the godly soul is a piece of godliness in every part of its manifestations. The animal soul is an animal. It's just of this world.
It's not evil.
It's not evil.
Wouldn't the banani be higher than the tzaddik then?
Hang on, he might be. He might be. Let me get that shortly. Nevertheless, these are okay. These are not just words to replace good and bad, body and soul. Rather, it's a much more subtle and sensitive approach where the animal soul is not evil. See, that's the key here. It's not evil. It's not. It's just an animal. Exactly. It's just self-centered.
Animals do not sin.
Do you know what? Sin.
Animals do not sin.
Right. You can't hold an animal accountable.
It's kind of like your primal part of your brain, the primal part that just flight or fight,
Flight or fight. Fight or
or flight. Yeah.
Right.
My mind. So it's that part of your brain.
So very good. So you talk about the animal soul, the animalistic instinct inside of you. Is it a pleasure seeker? Is the animal soul a pleasure seeker? Could you convince the animal? Could you train your animal like you could train your horse or your dog? Could you train it to focus on more refined interests? Of course you could. Just like a hooligan at the front door of your panhandling at the front of your office. You could train him to become your driver or your bodyguard.
We had that actually in real life.
Oh, you did that?
My brother's shop in New York, there was a homeless guy in the shop. There was a body shop, auto shop. And they hired him to be the cleaning guy. He worked there for like 10 years.
Amazing.
A week. Yeah.
So there's actually a good story about this, that there was, during Nazi Germany, there was these brown shirts that were protesting outside of a Jewish store. So what's he going to do? A Yiddish cup. He says, guys, you know what? I am so grateful for you. No, so it wasn't brown shirts. It wasn't brown shirts. It was these. It wasn't the war. It wasn't anti-Semitism. It was just these hooligan kids that were banging on the garbage bins. So he noticed that they were making a racket and it's bad for business. So he said to the kids, he's like, listen, guys, I so love this music that you're making every day. This garbage pail music that you make it. Could you please allow me to pay you? I want to pay you all, 2 quarters every day, each one of you. Kid looking at him like he's absolutely out of his mind. But like, okay, a fool and his money has to impart it, right? First day gives him each 50 cents. The second day, third day. It's about a week or so. He says, business isn't that good. I can only afford a quarter. We're not getting enough customers. Eventually, he's like, listen, guys, I can't afford to give you anything. Like, we're not going to do this for nothing. We're going to take our business elsewhere. So this animal soul isn't evil in its core. It's able to be refined and to reach more uplifted interests, and still it stays an animal. It means that as a physical human being, you got a soul which is related to this physical world, right? And it's got tremendous potential. The godly soul is just it's not even of this world. The godly soul literally it doesn't belong here. It's a piece of God. All it wants is to be united, transparent with godliness.
Sorry, the Rabbi says.
Just let me finish the sentence. And it's only with this aspiration where the godly soul wants to forget itself wants to let go of itself, to lose itself, and to become one with God, that the person is able to reach his true identity as a mensch. Just hold that thought a second, because it's only, this is a major, major theme in Tanya. It's only when you're able to identify, because you have a choice about how you want to identify. My godly soul, my animal soul, right? How many people do you know identify with their animal soul? They define themselves by the restaurants, by their money, by their investments, by their vacations, by their lifestyle. And how many people do you know that means nothing to them? They identify with what? With their Yiddishkeit. They identify with their minyan. They identify with their mitzvahs. You know, the cemetery has two different names which mean opposite things. A cemetery in Hebrew means Beit HaKvarot, a house of graves. And it also means Beis HaChayim, the house of life. How can the same place have opposite meanings? One means end of the road, one means house of life, house of death, house of life. The answer is it depends, not in the cemetery, it depends on you. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If you're living your life in a way that you identify with your animal soul, with your physical body and your physical pleasures, by the time you hit the cemetery, it's all over. Show's over, right? It's the house of graves. But if you identify with your godly soul, what happens when you reach a cemetery? Now it's a house of freedom. Now you're not limited to one place, to one time, to having to work to make a living. Now you're free. That's a house of life, right? It's only when we're able to have the courage to identify, to shift that paradigm shift from our animal soul to identify with our godly soul, and to be able to ride the wave and nurture the desire of the godly soul to become one with God, instead of seeing God as some sort of a suspicious outsider, a jealous king from a distance who's trying to hurt or subdue us, to see God as our mothership, as our source of life, so that when we can become one with God, it's then that we experience true peace and equanimity. Dan, what are you going to say?
About the Rabbi you mentioned earlier, he believed that everybody had both souls.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm a little confused with the Jewish conversion. It's as if God blows a soul.
You're talking about Gentile souls right now?
Yes.
Okay, let me say that Gentiles is more advanced. That's talking about that's going to be at the end of chapter 1. We will get there, but to give you a short version answer, is that what the Tanya tells us is that Jews have a godly soul, and the Gentiles don't have exactly a godly soul, but they have a spark of godliness, what's called the image of God, which is why the Torah tells us that the righteous Gentiles will experience eternal life with the coming of Mashiach. How could you possibly experience eternal life if you didn't have a piece of eternity within you, a piece of immortality? So the conversion would call it an upgrade. Have you ever upgraded your phone?
Yeah.
You've upgraded your car? Did it mean that the previous car wasn't a car? If it was a car, it just wasn't the new one, right?
Kind of like a pilot light.
Pilot light.
Yeah, never mind.
Oh, maybe a pilot light, yeah.
And
Turn into a bonfire,
They
yeah.
have a pilot.
Yeah. So from this definition of the inner struggle that goes on inside of our souls arises also a magnificent solution. That this is not a zero-sum game. This is not a war of all or nothing, in which a person attempts to wipe out, to destroy the evil within his soul. Oh, sorry, the one part of his soul. Because the animal soul is not evil at its core. If you're looking at it good and bad, then you try to vanquish. But if you're looking at it as a horse and its rider, you're not trying to kill the horse. That's not the goal, right? The nuclear option is not, is not what we're trying to achieve over here. You're trying to tame the horse. That's what we're trying to do, right? And therefore, the struggle is actually an educational one, where the person's job is to struggle and to inspire your animal soul, to elevate it higher and higher to a place of recognition and understanding, until your animal soul too will reach that state of the godly soul's desire to be incorporated within godliness, with her shared desires and aspirations, with the godly soul. And this will reach beautiful harmony with body and soul, heaven and earth, godly and animal souls. Think of it this way. Think of you going to, I went to Kazakhstan this past summer, right? And Kazakhstan, I had no idea what to expect. I mean, are there going to be buildings? Are there going to be roads? Are there going to be street lights, internet, running water? I don't know, right? I mean, you never know what you're going to find on the other side of the earth, right? So we got to this hotel, and it was a magnificent hotel. I think I sent you some videos. But I was like, okay, so who's going to be my roommate? I was thinking, so who's going to be my roommate? Who are they going to pair us up with, So as it happens, the flight from New York was canceled. So I was given, my own room. But think about it. Imagine you had to share a room with some Azerbaijani peasant. I don't know. I mean, how do you deal with that? Like, how does this work now? You don't know this guy. They put you together. We're both coming to visit the Rebbe's father, on the other side of the earth. I don't speak his language. He doesn't speak mine, but we want to make sure that everything is, civil and calm and safe. So that's effectively what happens when you come not to Kazakhstan, but to planet Earth. And you are inserted into this physical body. That's your hotel room. And you got a godly soul, and you got this animal soul. Like, we're going to be sharing this room now for the next 100 years? Okay. So what do you like to do? You know what I mean? It's just horrifying when the godly soul experiences the tug of war that goes on with it. But now you got to figure out a way. And Tanya talks about how the role of the Jew is really to, the godly soul could experience godliness up in heaven, but you needed to come down to this world to do it together with the animal soul. And now, what?
Who comes first, the animal? Or
the animal soul comes first. The godly soul only comes completely at the bas mitzvah. You know that game where they tie the feet together, the kids?
Yeah.
They tie their feet together, you got to sort of like
Right.
the two-legged race, three-legged race, right? You got to hobble your way across, right? So that's kind of what this is. You're tying it together. All right, guys, figure it out. Let's see who's going to win this. It's about synergy. It's not about individual talent, right? That's what the game is like. And now the goal is not to get there on your own and sort of like amputate. That's not the goal. The goal is to refine. And now we're starting to understand, so that's what my life is about. And we're starting to put into context our challenges. So when you're experiencing an addiction, if you're experiencing a unhealthy drive, desire, yearning, is it evil? No, probably not evil. It just needs to be elevated, channeled, harnessed, right? It's like a wild dog that needs to be trained. Right? And if you could train that talent, you know what amazing things you could do, right? Did you say your point down? You did, right? Now, you had a question about the banani, I think, right? How do we know the banani isn't higher than the tzaddik? How do you know? Maybe he is higher than the tzaddik. And this is all advanced if you're listening here for the first time. But I would just say this, that it says in the Talmud, that in the place that the Bali Teshuvah reach, that the penitents reach, is higher in heaven than the place that the perfect righteous ones reach.
That was my thinking. My thinking was the person who overcomes a struggle should be higher than the person who was born with.
Because let me put this into perspective. We weren't sent to this world to be perfect. If God wanted us to be perfect, the last place he would send us would be here. Right?
No, we'd be an angel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The last place. I don't know where we get this misconception from. I think I do know where we get the misconception from, actually. I'll tell you where we get it from. We were sent to this world to synergize, to limp our way towards improvement. That is what the Tanya is teaching us. And you might never, ever get there in your three-legged race. You might never reach the destination. But guess what? Tanya chapter 15 and 27 tells us that might just very well be the goal. The goal is not the destination. The goal is the journey. Your struggle is epic nachas to your Father in heaven. I mean, what a revolutionary idea that is, right? It's so validating to think that the things that I've struggled with my whole life, thinking that I'm just nasty, evil, horrible human being. And if the world only knew what really is going on inside of me, they would just disown me. It's okay. God created you like this. I'll tell you where this notion of perfection comes from. We have an extremely skilled evil inclination within us. This animal soul is no dumb animal. He's a very, very skilled craftsman. In fact, the Zohar, the Kabbalah calls her, your animal soul, her a skilled seductress. She is the most talented prostitute in the land. Nobody beats this one. All right? So this skilled seductress, your evil inclination, your animal soul, came up with this brilliant idea that says, you know what? We love God so much that you've got to be perfect. And if you can't be perfect, it's not worth it. Don't even try. And the animal soul knows that you're never going to get there. So she, in her brilliance, she said, look, I'm willing to help you get there, knowing that you're never going to get there. But because she wants you to fail, she sets the bar so high that 99.999% of humanity doesn't even bother. That's where this notion comes from. The skilled seductress, our evil inclination, is so smart. And you're up for the battle of your life, literally, as he faces. I'd like to try to finish this piece. In this perpetual battle within you, and it's perpetual, because most people don't even have the tools to win this battle, right? Which comes from the double personality within us. So we effectively are schizophrenic. It also has some other kind of consequences. Throughout the generations, the leaders of Jewish theology, of the approach of Mussar, of rebuke, then they understood the importance, indeed the necessity, to bring a person to a clear identification, internal identification with his actions. It was always understood that if the action that you do is purely mechanical, if you do only like a good deed out of rote without any internal meaning, then it's of a much lower quality. And to reach a high level of ethics, of where your actions are filled with meaning, that's only very few people able to reach that. The majority of people, they give up from even trying to reach this, from reaching this level, because they're struggling with their whole lives with hypocrisy. And this is the key word here, is hypocrisy. We're struggling. We have this hypocrisy. We realize, how many times have your own family members said to you, you're going to shul? I know you. I know who you are, okay? Don't you tell me that now suddenly you became all holy in me, okay? I was there with you when we were this, when we did that, right? So we struggle. How many people don't come to shul because of hypocrisy? Thank you. Because of hypocrisy. How many people don't even try because they're afraid of being viewed by others, or even worse, by themselves, as hypocritical? Comes the Tanya and he says, that's the way it's meant to be. You're supposed to be a hypocrite. It's okay to be a hypocrite. Nothing wrong. That's the way God made you. You're davening and you're feeling intense desires for thoughts that should not be thought anywhere, right? It's okay. It means that the battle in you is alive and well. That's what it means. That's Tanya chapter 28. And in chapter 28, I'll just give you a quick example. He says, what happens when you have two fighters wrestling in a ring? And one of them ups his game and he gets all excited and passionate about the game. What happens to the other one? Does the opponent say, oh, I'm out, I give up? No. He increases his game. He gets more crazy, right? He starts punching it like his life depends on it. So if you find yourself in shul thinking thoughts that are just horrible, nasty, evil, selfish, narcissistic, and all sorts of lusty, lewd and lascivious, is that what he says? Lewd and lascivious. I can't even pronounce the word. I'm sorry. Thank God. Lewd and lascivious thoughts. Okay. You know what that means? Says the Alter Rebbe. It means your godly soul is on fire. That's what it means. It means your animal soul is feeling deeply intimidated. Don't be afraid. This is what's going on over here. This is unbelievable, right? On the contrary, the Alter Rebbe is brilliant, and he's so practical. He says, you're worried about your animal soul getting too strong. That means you're doing everything right. That's what it means. If you had one soul, says the Alter Rebbe, you'd be 100% right. If you had one soul, you'd be 100% right to be worried that while I'm trying to daven, I'm thinking lewd and lascivious thoughts, right? That this is bad. But if I'm trying to daven and I'm thinking lewd and lascivious thoughts, I'm pushing them out of my head. I'm trying, right? But it's hard. And I have two souls. It means the battle is epic. You're alive. Game on. Absolutely. Keep up the fight because you're getting close. That's what it means, right? The book of Tanya, in its digging into the essence and the core of who we are with our two souls, reaches an even deeper understanding. Not every person is able to reach the victory, a full victory of his godly soul over his animal soul. But guess what? You don't even have to. You're not obligated. It doesn't say anywhere that you have to beat your animal soul, right? The war itself within you is not a negative thing. That's how God created you. It's okay. It could be a good person, not only with his actions, but even with his speech and even with his thoughts, right? And within, you're a broken soul. Within, you're conflicted and you're torn asunder, right? A person it is demanded of a person only that you reach perfection where? In your three soul garments. What are your three soul garments? Tanya chapter 4. Thought, speech, and action. That's it. That's the only place where you're expected to have perfection on a practical level. Now, practical normally means action. In America, we don't think of speech as an action. I don't think you can. I think you could be sued for saying bad things about people, right?
Yes, slander and libel.
Okay, but can you be held accountable? Would it hold water to say that I just said words? It didn't hurt anybody. Does that count for anything?
That only goes to damages.
Only goes to.
You can be found guilty of slandering someone, but if it didn't actually cause harm, there have been cases. What's his name? Who was the general from Israel who sued the New York Times? Sharon?
Yeah.
And he won $1.
Oh, you got $1.
$1.
Token of defamation.
Yeah, they said you were defamed, but
Didn't cause you any damages. Okay, so that would never work in Torah, because in Torah, every word that comes out of your mouth, regardless of the damage it causes the other, it's the damage it causes to you. Were you manifesting your animal soul, your self-centered animal soul, or were you manifesting your God-centered, godly soul, right? Now, in America, nobody would ever sue anybody else for thinking bad thoughts about them, right? That's impossible to prove, right? So nobody would ever think that would be practical, but in Torah, absolutely. Thought, speech, and action. And indeed, this is the founding text of the book of Tanya. What's the founding text? It's based on a verse in the end of the Torah in Deuteronomy. I'll tell you something from the Rabbi last night. I'm going to translate it literally. For the thing is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. We've understood that always to mean that it's very easy to reach a state of speech, thought, and action of perfection. That's how we've always understood this. In the Farbrengen, I attended last night, which I was telling you about before, with the Rebbe's human tape recorder, Rabbi Simon Jacobson. He said that he had much access to the Rebbe because he was constantly sending in the transcripts and asking for little nuances. So he asked the Rebbe, would it be fair to translate this verse not as, for the thing is very near to you to reach perfection? He translated it as relevant. It's interesting. I really got to think about what he meant by that. But hi, Alan Newman. So nice to see you with us. I'm sorry I didn't introduce anybody. I get so into this stuff. I didn't get a chance to say hello to everybody, but welcome to everybody. So let me just finish this piece up over here that your perfection is required only in thought, speech, and action. But you're not ever required to reach inner harmony. Guess what? You don't have the ability to do that. Well, learn, only if you're a tzaddik, you're able to do that. Most people are not tzaddikim, perfectly righteous. So you just can't do it. You don't have the tools. Which means you're going to have to struggle the rest of your life, get comfortable. That's what the Alter Rebbe tells us. Wow, how validating. So what that means is if you're a grandfather and you're still struggling with the demons that you had when you were a teenager, then you look at yourself and you say, I must be an awful human being. There must be something so terribly wrong with me. The world has never seen such an evil, horrible person like me. And thank God that nobody else knows about it. Comes Alter Rebbe and says, good morning, America. It's okay. This is exactly how God created you. You have a very healthy animal soul. It's supposed to be that way. Nothing wrong with having those desires. Don't act on them. Thought, speech, or action. Don't even think about them consciously. That's going to be challenging, right? Thought, speech, or action. But to have them, to harbor them, to have the desire, of course, because you're normal. That's the novelty of the Alter Rebbe here. That in the previous generations, they said they were like uncomfortable with the whole idea of hypocrisy. He says, hypocrisy, bring it on. That's what it's meant to be. And therefore, the problem of hypocrisy actually demotivated so many people throughout the ages. But now that we understand the duality of souls within us, and we can become perfectly comfortable with it, that you were never created to be perfect in the first place. You were created to be imperfect, and nevertheless to strive to fulfill your godly purpose on this earth. And since now you know that your desires and your undesirable desires and your undesirable thoughts, right? They come from an essence which is truly a part of you, of your animal soul. And you're not supposed to uproot them. Suddenly, I'm no longer a tragedy. My life is not a catastrophe. It's okay, right? I'm no longer holding a crisis point. I'm no longer feeling sorry for myself. On the contrary, with this knowledge, a person is able to reach perfection, true perfection within your soul, because perfection is no longer about becoming perfect. It's about becoming stable. I can now become a tzaddik in every part of my life. And at the same time, to still continue, I can be a tzaddik perfect in the outside part of my life, my clothing, soul garments, soul speech and action, but to still struggle within. And this is the spiritual vision that the Tanya places before us with the vision of the banani, the character of the banani, who this book is called the book of the banani, the book of the intermediates. There's three levels of Jews: the evil, the sinner, the middle, and the righteous, right? We're not talking about the righteous. We're not talking about the sinners. We're talking about the in-betweeners, right? The banani. You got to get used to that word. B-E-N-O-I-N. Sorry, B-E-N-O-N-I. B-E-N-O-N-I. Banani, right? This is our aspiration. We're trying to become a banani, which is a middle-level Jew. He's the guy who's the hero of the book, right? And the book is named after him. This is the guy that really serves God. This is the guy in chapter 15. The Alter Rebbe tells us, you know who somebody who serves God is? Who's the guy that serves God? The righteous person or the struggling Jew? The struggling Jew. The righteous one is over the hill. He's like in the retirement home. It doesn't help anymore. You're not contributing to society anymore. But when you're struggling your way through, now we're talking, right? This is the guy that's serving God. Every single day he gets up to fight a battle. And this gives God tremendous nachas. I give you a quote from the Zohar, which the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya. He says, whenever you suppress your evil inclination and you don't act in it, you unleash a blinding, infinite light that spreads throughout the universe from one end to the other. You're introducing infinity into a finite space that nobody else was able to introduce before. Each and every single time that you suppress your desire. Now, what happens if you no longer have a desire? Because you've now conquered your animal soul, which would be the tzaddik. I'm like, what's my role now? Right? Incidentally, the Alter Rebbe wrote another book called the Sefer Shel Tzaddikim, the Book of the Righteous. But apparently that book was burnt in fire. It wasn't meant to be. We didn't need the book. Guess what?
Which book was burned?
No one gets there.
It's called the Book of Tzaddikim, the Book of the Perfectly Righteous.
And it burned?
It got burnt by divine providence.
The
he didn't want everybody.
No, there was a fire. There's something we understand that there's a fire. When there's a fire below, it doesn't happen by mistake. It's because from heaven it was meant to be that way, right? The banani is the ideal to which we are supposed to strive. It opens the opening for us every place and every level to find your place, to know what you're looking for, to serve God in truth. Now, these points, with all of their importance, they don't represent the content of the whole book of Tanya. This is a book where the tangential points, right, actually become central points, and they're no less important than the central points of the book. Okay, every point is a revolution. This is a book where the more you read it, the more you find ideas that you never saw before. And I have to tell you, I've been studying this book since I'm 16. 26 years. I've been studying this book, and every time I read it, I'm like, I never knew that. I find stuff that I never knew, right? A worldview that evolves, that changes. It's the most incredible book I've ever read. Okay. The whole Torah is folded up into this book, and it's Reb Zusha of Anipoli, who was a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, said, "I'm in total wonder how it's possible to infuse such a great God into such a tiny little book. If we try to define the Tanya, maybe we could do so in the words of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, who said that the book of Tanya is the written Torah of the Kabbalah, of the teachings of Chassidus. So you have the written Torah and the oral Torah and the secret Torah, right? The 5 books of Moses is the foundation of the whole Torah, right? So the book of Tanya is the foundation, is the written Torah. It's the core, it's the mothership of the whole book of the whole Torah of Chassidus. And when somebody learns the Tanya, it's like learning Chumash. It's the equivalent of learning Chumash. That whoever learns it, everyone learns it, from the biggest giants in Torah to the earliest beginners, everyone according to his level, and everyone will find what they need to find. And this concludes the introduction to the general introduction of the book of Tanya. I believe it is. I'm going to try to find it. I heard about it. I'm going to find it. A few comments coming in here. Corey, it sounds like that in English, but the Hebrew name for Benjamin and the Hebrew word for banani are completely different. Yes, correct. Have to say strong. Does the animal soul as well leave when we are sleeping? No, it does not. Marty, where does the animal natural soul come from? If not from Hashem, of course it comes from Hashem. It's just an animal. It's animal. It's like a tiger. It's a part of this physical world. That's where it comes from. We'll talk about this. We're just doing general introductions here, guys. All right. Give me comments, feedback, friends, on the style of learning. I am going to be evolving this as we do one chapter at a time. We're going to write it up. I'm going to have you help me edit it, and we're going to put it into book format. So stick with me on this. We got great excitement to come. Thank you very much, everybody. Shalom, and have a wonderful day. Good Yantav. May we all be inscribed and sealed in the learning of for a good year, in the learning of Chassidus and in the ways of Chassidus on this holy day of Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. Thank you.
Are you finished?
Yeah.